to veto. What President Donald Trump is saying about massive spending measures, including one to help Americans affected by the coronavirus. Returning home. An update on the Archbishop of Belarus denied entry into the country for several weeks. Holy Father's schedule. A preview of how Pope Francis will spend Christmas and why it will look a little different this year. And Catholics in space. We'll show you a story about the faithful that is out of this world. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, December 23rd, 2020. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Late this afternoon, President Donald Trump vetoed the Pentagon funding bill. His rejection of the massive $740 billion military spending plan is sending congressional leaders scrambling to call back lawmakers and try to override the veto. This is the first time in 6 decades that the annual National Defense Authorization Act has not been approved. Meantime, harsh words from President Trump calling Congress's massive COVID-19 relief package a disgrace, saying more needs to be done to help the American people, including increasing the amount of direct payments nearly fourfold. And it looks like the Speaker of the House may be ready to make a deal.
Congress found plenty of money for foreign countries, lobbyists, and special interests, while sending the bare minimum to the American people.
President Donald Trump is telling lawmakers to try again.
I am asking Congress to amend this bill and increase the ridiculously low $600 to $2,000 or $4,000 for a couple.
And the Democratic House Speaker is willing to do it, tweeting, "This can be done by noon on Christmas Eve." Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House could take up a request for unanimous consent to increase those direct payments. But first, the Republican leader needs to back the motion. And Democrats criticize the president, accusing him of pulling a stunt.
But this president wants to get attention at the end of the year, pardoning people left and right.
Senator Amy Klobuchar referring to the 15 pardons announced last night. President Trump also commuted part or all of the sentences to 5 other people, including 2 former GOP congressmen. But when it comes to President Trump's demands for higher payments to Americans in order to sign the long-sought COVID relief bill, the ball is back in the Republicans' court. Representative Chris Smith, Republican from New Jersey, senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, joins me now on Skype. Congressman, welcome back. Thank you so much for your time today. I'd like to start by getting your reaction to President Trump's veto today of the National Defense Authorization Act. Were you surprised at all by that?
Not at all. He's been threatening it for many, many days. He wanted some reform in there that is needed. Dealing with Facebook and Twitter, and that was not included. I had wished it would have been. But I think vetoing the entire bill, which funds our military, was not a good idea, especially since pay raises for our military are embedded in that bill. Maybe we will probably vote to override on Monday. If that fails, it'll be back to the drawing board, and we will continue working to try to get it secured in terms of its passage.
I know that you supported the passage of the COVID relief bill. President Trump says, the amount of the direct payments should be increased. Would you be in favor of increasing those amounts of those direct payments? And if so, why?
Well, I think we've tried to be accommodating to the great, tremendous need that people are suffering. So the past CARES Act made clear that that money would be forthcoming. They got their checks, and it made some difference. We are on the verge, I hope, with the vaccinations that are now beginning to unfold. So a bridge to get to that point, and if it means a little more money, even a lot more, let's do it. This is, people are suffering immensely. I had wished, frankly, when I heard this, that the president, Drew Mnuchin, would have said earlier that he wanted this higher number, so that we would have negotiated upwards rather than at $600. So, no one knows the exact number. What's the best thing to do? But we need to be generous because people are suffering immensely. They're not being able to pay their rent, their food bills, their mortgages if they own a home. And certainly with all the businesses that have gone out of business, those jobs need to be replaced at some point, and we're not there yet. So I wish you would have talked about it sooner, and that's what I'm very concerned about. But hopefully we get there. I mean, Congress is, the art of trying to find, compromise where it is good to do so. So if it ratchets up those payments, it's a good thing.
All right. Before we let you go, I do want to talk about the pro-life language included in the measure as it stands now and the importance of that. We talked briefly about it yesterday, but I want to get your take on that. We have about a minute left.
Sure. Well, all of our pro-life riders, including the Hyde Amendment, all the others, are still going to be intact until September 31st. There will be a major effort by Joe Biden. He has made promises to be the abortion president. The promises that he's made are, he won't enforce conscience rights as they did not enforce them for 8 years. Javier Becerra, who will be the HHS secretary if confirmed, he is from California, where many of these egregious violations of conscience have occurred. So we had the conscience laws intact during the 8 years of Obama and Biden, and they were never enforced. So Catholic entities were being forced to subsidize abortion, to include it in their package of health care. So we got a real problem coming, but we do have language that was continued from last year to this in the omnibus bill. Let me say very quickly, Tracy, and also on the foreign aid side, unfortunately, the abortion president will probably on day 1 or 2 reverse a number of executive orders that have been in place, great executive orders, including ensuring that our foreign aid does not subsidize the abortion industry. He will get rid of that on day 1 or 2. And that's an outrageous thing because countries in Africa and Latin America are all at risk when we fund Planned Parenthood and others to pay for abortion on demand. Finally, you mentioned Belarus. I'm the author of the Belarus Democracy, Human Rights, and Sovereignty Act. That legislation is embedded in the omnibus bill. I got it passed in the U.S. House of Representatives. I wrote the 2004 law that it expands. And that's about personal sanctions against Lukashenko, the dictator there, and many other of his cronies who are just horribly mistreating the human rights and democracy activists, including the church. So we have language in there about the church and about the Archbishop, and that's already in the omnibus bill that we're hoping the president will sign. He has not said whether or not he'll veto or sign that one either.
All right, Congressman Chris Smith, thank you so much. Got to leave it right there. Thanks for your time today. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, too.
Well, the coronavirus has killed more than 320,000 people across the U.S., and now millions of Americans are traveling ahead of Christmas and New Year's. And public health experts say it could fuel a raging pandemic. Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, more than 5 million people passed through the nation's airport security checkpoints between Friday and Tuesday, according to the Transportation Security Administration. Health officials say we already saw a surge in the coronavirus after Thanksgiving, and Dr. Anthony Fauci says these new travel numbers are concerning.
This type of travel is risky, particularly if people start congregating when they get to their destination in larger crowds in indoor settings. I'm afraid that if, in fact, we see this happen, we will have a surge that's superimposed upon the difficult situation we are already in.
Following concerns about a new strain of the coronavirus discovered in the UK, some countries relaxed travel restrictions on Britain, but dozens of other countries continue to bar travelers. And here's how one U.S. city is dealing with this. New York City will send sheriff's deputies to the homes or hotel rooms of all travelers coming from the UK to ensure they comply with the city's 2-week coronavirus quarantine requirement. In the studio, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
The Archbishop of Minsk is finally allowed to return home. He had been in exile since August. Reports say that he was accused of making foreign contacts during a trip to Poland. The Archbishop is sent to celebrate Christmas Mass with the faithful. The Vatican and U.S. State Department had requested he be permitted to return home. Pope Francis reminds the faithful that Christmas can remove every bit of anxiety and pessimism.
Meditare un po' in silenzio davanti al presepe.
At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says the only meaning of Christmas is that God became one of us to become closer to us. He also called on the faithful to spend time in front of a nativity scene in silence in order to contemplate the birth of Christ. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, Christmas at the Vatican will look a little different this year. Earlier, I spoke with EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn for a preview of the Pope's upcoming schedule. Joining us now with more is EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn. Colin, good to see you. So what does the Pope's Christmas schedule look like this year?
Good evening, Tracy. Pope Francis will celebrate midnight Mass in St. Peter's Basilica at 7:30 p.m. Rome time on December the 24th. That's a little bit earlier than normal to comply with Italy's 10 p.m. curfew. Now, this Mass is typically celebrated with Vatican officials, diplomats and ambassadors. However, only about 50 people will be in attendance this year. Then on Christmas Day, the Pope will give his Christmas blessing to pilgrims, also called the Urbi et Orbi. That is usually done from the Apostolic Palace window just behind me here, but this Christmas it will be broadcast from inside. Now, this will be the Holy Father's second Urbi et Orbi this year because he gave a special blessing back in March at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Then, on New Year's Eve, Pope Francis will pray Vespers and the Te Deum in thanksgiving for the past year at 5 p.m. in St. Peter's Basilica. This will air live on EWTN and be carried across our social media. And on New Year's Day, the Pope will celebrate Mass for the Solemnity of Mary, the Mother of God, and the World Day of Peace, again with a limited number of people present. And this is also the 54th World Day of Peace. And the Pope's message will be on the culture of care and a path to peace.
Well, Colm, how are Italians celebrating Christmas?
Well, Tracy, last week, Italy's Prime Minister, Giuseppe Conte, announced a nationwide partial lockdown during the holidays to avoid large gatherings and a potential spike in cases. Now, as of yesterday, there were 10,000 new positive cases in the country and over 400 deaths. Now, this partial lockdown started yesterday and will continue through Epiphany on January the 6th. All bars, restaurants and shops are expected to be closed, but grocery stores and pharmacies will remain open. On Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and the day after Christmas, there will be a hard lockdown. So everything will be closed and you can only leave the house to go to Mass and to visit another family member, but no more than an extra 2 people are allowed in each household.
Well, Colin, what else is happening around the Vatican during Christmas?
Tracy, due to the new lockdown, it's very different this year, but thankfully charity groups will still be working around the clock to provide food for the homeless. One church in Rome decided to open its doors during the night to give the local people living on the streets a warm place to sleep during Christmas. They've set up individual beds with heaters and will provide meals for them as well. So although this Christmas will be very different to other Christmases here in Rome, many will be working hard to bring the Christmas joy to those who most need it. And like Pope Francis always says, we are all in the same boat together and must not forget the most vulnerable around us. Tracy?
All right, Colm, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Colm Flynn, EWTN News Rome correspondent. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, we hear from the head of a Catholic group that's helping children in need. Tonight in this season of giving, we take a look at a Catholic organization dedicated to caring for the most vulnerable populations throughout the developing world. Earlier, I spoke with the executive director of Mustard Seed Communities about its programs and the role faith plays in that work. Joining me now on Skype to tell us more is Father Garvin Augustine, Executive Director of Mustard Seed Communities International. Father, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. Let's talk about the mission of these communities. What's at the heart of that mission, and what are some of the services that you're able to provide?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me on EWTN. Mustard Seed Communities cares for children who are abandoned, particularly those with varying forms of disability, also children who are HIV and AIDS positive. We also run a home for pregnant teens. We are here in Jamaica. We have 12 homes in Jamaica across the island, caring for approximately 500 children. But we're also in Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic, Zimbabwe, and Malawi in Africa. And Our main mission is to care for and sort of bring a sense of dignity and hope to these children who have been otherwise abandoned or orphaned.
And Father, can you talk to us about the connection between our faith and of the importance of caring for vulnerable? How significant is that in supporting a culture of life?
Oh, tremendously. First of all, Mustard Seed Communities was founded by Father Gregory Ramkissoon, now Monsignor Gregory Ramkissoon, many, many years ago. And I think one important factor is just a sense of our connection to our Creator. We have a great devotion to Our Lady as well. We believe that life is meaningless and purposeless without a spiritual connection, without a connection to our Maker. And we encourage that in all our locations. Our children are all baptized. Once we get them into our system, they're all baptized Catholic. The staff and volunteers who work with us are not necessarily so, but everybody participates in all our religious observances. You know, without a sense of spirituality, without a sense of connection to God, we would just be another social service. So we really promote and believe that we have to have that connection, that faith, that hope in Christ, our Creator, who died and rose for our sakes. And therefore, we are committed in all that we do. For example, every location that we have, every home has to have a chapel. We have a couple adoration rooms as well. We do 24-hour adoration in most of our facilities because we believe that this is what sustains us. This is what keeps us going. This is what protects us and guides us.
Absolutely. You know, I want to talk about the pandemic right now. As you know, it's impacted nearly everyone. Tell us how it impacted your organization and its operations in Africa, Central America, and other parts of the Caribbean.
Well, a lot of our support comes from benefactors, particularly in the States, some in Ireland, some in England as well, but mostly from the United States. And we have a very robust volunteer program where our volunteers come to Jamaica and to Nicaragua in the different locations, volunteer their services, but they also raise funds for us. And they bring in all the resources that we need, medical supplies, food supplies, etc. And with the pandemic, since March, we have had to have these volunteers coming anymore, and therefore we are short in our supply of well-needed goods and medicines and diapers and funding. So we've had to find creative ways, of course, you know, with the online platforms and so on, to keep our volunteers connected, but also to try and raise funds. Also myself and Monsignor Gregory, we do a lot of traveling as well and preaching to raise funds and fundraising activities. And all that came to an abrupt halt in March. So really we were scrambling in the initial stages to kind of find ways to fill the gap. And everybody is fine. And we've been getting a lot of benefactors who have been tremendously generous to keep us going over the last few months into the next year. So again, we have to thank God for this. And it's by the grace of God that we are able to do this. It's God's children we care for. So I'm confident that God is going to continue to look after us.
If people would like to help out, how can they best do that?
We have an office in Medfield, just outside of Boston, that manages our social media and so on. There's a website, www.mustardseed.com, and they can go onto the website, and there are different links as to how people can donate and so on, and get more information on Mustard Seed Communities.
Well, Father, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for what you do. Father Garvin Augustine, Executive Director of Mustard Seed Communities International. Thank you again.
My pleasure. God bless you.
Up next, a look back at Christmas Eve 1968 and its connection to the Catholic faith. Plus, more nativity scenes sent in by you, our viewers. On Christmas Eve 1968, people tuned in as the crew of Apollo 8 read from the book of Genesis. It was during the first trip around the moon. That venture was an inspiration around the world, but the story does not end there. EWTN's Gabe LaMonica tells us about the Catholic faith in space.
The astronaut's prayer goes something along the lines of, "Dear Lord, don't let me mess up." For Catholic astronauts, there's a little more to it, and some have even taken communion in zero gravity. For many, space has been a confirmation of their faith since the beginning. The first humans to see Earth rising behind the moon read the Word of God.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The engines are on. 4, 3.
That 1968 Apollo 8 mission launched the United States into first place in the space race against the Soviet Union.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
A milestone in a national journey spurred on by America's first Catholic president.
This had never been done before. Obviously, no one had circled the moon before.
The three-man Apollo crew, 240,000 miles above the globe, paved the way for the moon landings months later.
And God called the dry land earth. God saw that it was good.
After a billion or so Earthlings listened in to that Bible reading over 50 years ago, NASA got cold feet over public statements of faith.
And Madalyn Murray O'Hair, an atheist, threatened to sue NASA, and NASA caved. And after that said, any spiritual acknowledgments, ask for radio silence.
That doesn't mean astronauts leave behind their trust in God.
When you see the Earth from orbit, 220 miles up, and you look in the other direction and see the infinity of the cosmos, the universe out there, with the numberless stars that are in your field of view, that to me, it's a confirmation of your faith.
Tom Jones spent 53 days in space over the course of 4 missions.
Main engine start. 5,
the astronaut
4,
brought with him a firm Catholic faith and is one of only a handful of Catholics to receive Holy Communion while floating in the heavens above.
For Catholics, it's a very special meaning where Christ is physically present with you and becomes part of you. And that was very, very special to me.
And he's not the only Catholic spaceman.
Ignition.
Now, on board the first commercial mission to the International Space Station is another Catholic in space.
First across the edge, Mike Hopkins.
During a 6-month stint, NASA astronaut Mike Hopkins brought along a supply of communion. Years earlier, Tom Jones shared the sacrament with 2 other Catholics in space.
We hit sunrise just as we were sharing communion. And there's the gorgeous blue of the ocean down below. And Kevin Chilton, my friend, said, that's the blue of the Virgin's veil. So it was in every direction that you looked, you found something meaningful and beautiful. And it was a very emotional moment for all of us.
A perspective only a privileged few have witnessed even since human spaceflight's beginning.
We close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
The reception here on Earth of the crew of Apollo 8's Christmas time message was overwhelmingly positive. At the end of a tumultuous year, many credited Apollo 8 with saving 1968. In Washington, Gabe LaMonica, EWTN News Nightly.
Incredible. And before we go, we have more round of nativity scenes that we'd like to share with you tonight. This one comes from Melanie Maisnick. This nativity scene was built and painted by her husband, Dave. It was set up in their gazebo near Radville, Saskatchewan, Canada. Love that. Next up from Maryland is the Malloy family. They share this creche with a stable located behind the inn, waiting for the arrival of the Holy Family. Love that. Okay, next up we have Connie Bacheri. She sent in this from St. Mary's Church in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Look at that. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? I love that. And this is from Pilar Belhumer. This is a beautiful nativity scene right here. It's at her mother's house, she says. Pilar says this holds many wonderful memories for their family. I bet it does. Love that. And here's a nativity scene from Janet Hong in Salina, Ohio. Thank you for sending this. That is so lovely. And finally, this one is from one of our own EWTN News Nightly senior producer Rodney Harris and his wife Colleen, showing us their group of nativity scenes, including a snow globe and even a Peanuts crush. That is fantastic. Thank you guys so much. We love it. And thank you to everyone who sent in pictures of their nativity scenes and those we didn't have a chance to show on the air, like the beautiful crush sent by Brian and Barbara Bulger in Maryland. We thank you all, and we thank you for watching tonight. And we will be airing special programming the rest of the week for Christmas and special reports from EWTN News Nightly next week. From all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless, and a very Merry Christmas to you and yours.